This video is to help you if you're studying for the Edexcel A specification A-level exam this summer, or if you're a teacher who has students doing the exam. We'll think about the topics that might be due for testing. Now, this might be because they've not been asked about since the specification was first examined in 2017, or because they've been topical in the news. Before we get started, there's just one thing I need to say. This video will help you, but you should never rely on question spotting as the basis for exam success. Please study thoroughly and widely across the entire specification. So let's get started with some thoughts for paper 1 this summer. At the top of the list, I've got government failure. This is an important topic, and the danger of government failure can be used when evaluating government policies. But it's not yet been tested in its own right, and it lends itself brilliantly to 25-mark questions such as evaluate the view that government failure is a common outcome when governments intervene in markets. Linked to government failure, we can look at possible contexts for intervention, for example in response to market failures associated with public goods. Public goods haven't yet been tested in a long paper 1 question. Meanwhile, policy on smoking and vaping could provide a topical context for a question about intervention in response to externalities. We'd usually expect there to be a question about market structures somewhere on the paper, and monopolistic competition is a structure there hasn't yet been a long question about, so this looks a strong possibility. The next 2 topics on the list are ones that I think students may be tempted to ignore in revision, yet they will be tested at some point, and possibly this year. It's true that this might be through shorter questions at the beginning of the paper rather than long ones, but if you learn the content inside out, you'd do very well if they did come up as a longer question for 8, 10, 12 or 15 marks as part of question 6, or even as a 25 marker in question 7 or 8. The advantages of free market and command economies seem especially well suited to a 25 marker. The concept of minimum efficient scale is important for size of barriers to entry to a market and looks due for testing, and it has links to deregulation, which also looks a likely topic. Deregulation involves removing legal entry barriers to markets to try to make them more contestable, but this may be ineffective where there are high structural barriers to entry. Price capping is highly topical, especially in relation to the energy price cap, but also in other contexts, such as possible caps on chief executive pay or on rented accommodation. Finally, I'd expect there to be something about labour markets somewhere on the paper. A couple of years ago, there was a question about the influences on labour supply, so perhaps something about labour demand is more likely this time around. Moving on to paper 2, I've been surprised to find there's been very little about inflation yet. It was touched upon briefly in a short answer question in 2019 and again in 2023, but there seems very little for such an important topic. Over the past 2 years, the struggle to control inflation has been big news. It's worth noting that the related topic of the role of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee has not yet been tested. It would make for a great question 6, with different parts of a question looking at things like how inflation is measured, the costs of inflation, the pros and cons of interest rates being set by the Monetary Policy Committee, and the effects of raising the base rate to control inflation. Policies to correct a balance of payments deficit is a top tip. It's so due for testing, and it lends itself to a 25-mark evaluate policies style question. And it's one that would be fairly straightforward with effective revision and preparation. Now, at the moment, the UK economy faces a number of supply-side challenges, such as a low rate of investment as a percentage of GDP, which links to the UK's productivity problem. A question about the determinants of investment is possible, but also about the effects of investment, or perhaps low investment. Investment is a component of AD, but is perhaps more important because of its effect on the long-run potential output of the economy. So questions in this area invite you to analyse and evaluate both the demand side and supply side impacts of investment. The topic of the business cycle and the impact on it of supply side shocks has been highly topical in recent years, with shocks such as Brexit, COVID, and the conflict in the Ukraine. The UK economy technically entered recession in the second half of 2023, so we could easily imagine a question in this area. In 2023, question 6, the long data response question, was set in the context of economic development in Angola. For this reason, I'd expect question 6 this year to be firmly focused on the UK economy. However, there will surely be some element of theme 4 material on the paper, and key areas to look at are comparative advantage theory and the pros and cons of fixed and floating exchange rates. For comparative advantage theory, I would pre-learn the analysis based on a worked example from a comparative advantage matrix. The last possibility on the list has been highly topical in recent years, and this often inspires examiners to ask questions. The UK national debt is now around 100% of GDP, and the question as to how to get the debt down has been the subject of much discussion. Do we reduce government spending and raise taxes, or do we try to grow GDP so that tax revenue increases? The dash for growth from Liz Truss's short time as Prime Minister in the autumn of 2022 could easily provide the context for a Paper 2 or Paper 3 data response question. Economics Factory has a number of key resources to help you prepare for your exam. In relation to the topics we've just been looking at, we have our Edexcel style papers for 2024. This resource consists of 2 brand new micro paper 1s and 2 brand new macro paper 2s in the style of the Edexcel exam. The questions are on topics that we see as due for testing, and the resource includes very detailed mark schemes, which give lots of ideas for the content that you might include in your answers. Now, do also consider buying our papers from 2023, because the topics that didn't come up then are even more due for testing. And off the top of my head, I can remember that in our 2023 papers, we had questions about monopolistic competition and also about inflation and the setting of interest rates. And as we've explained in this video, they both look really important areas for this year's exam. We also have a separate paper 3 on due topics. Now for this, we think the water industry would provide a great case study that opens up a number of angles such as price-making power, externalities in production, and also topics in development. We think the supply-side challenges facing the UK economy would also provide a great context for a paper 3 question. There's so much you could ask about there. And the dash for growth of Liz Truss's short-lived government of autumn 2022 could easily provide a context for a paper 3 question. Thanks for watching the video. Please do share it with others who are studying for the exam. And I hope it's been really useful for you in your exam preparations. Please remember we've got other resources available, particularly our model answers. We do have one to every current specification past paper question, which are available as a comprehensive set, or you can buy them by the paper or by the question. They're incredibly popular. All that remains, I think, is for me to wish you the very best of luck for your exam. I hope it goes brilliantly for you, and I hope you get the outcome you want.